so that we don't have to keep having these workshops, so that we don't have to, so that I don't have to update my hoodie with names that of fallen Black people. I'm going to step off my soapbox really quickly. I got in the moment. But yeah, that is how I am trying to fathom how to have the talk with my child.
Thank you, Taylor. I see you, I hear you, I feel you. And once again, I just wanted to acknowledge all that we as Black facilitators are bringing into this moment, all that we're carrying. And I just appreciate DJ and Taylor for showing up and speaking their truth, regardless of how raw it is and all the emotions that are coming up. And one thing that I just wanted to add to this, who knows, maybe I can be the advocate to push for this. I don't want to treat conversations about race like the talk, like the birds and the bees. It's a one-time conversation, and then like you just hope that sunk in and go forth and be great. I want it to be a continuous conversation. It's not a one and done thing. Check that off on my list. My kid's gonna be good. It's gonna be the beginning, a new chapter to continue the conversation. We talked about it once. You can come to me with your questions. You can be vulnerable. You can mess up. I can mess up. I learned so much, and we'll see in the next slides. I learned so much the most when I interact with students. I've been humbled in respectful ways by students who let me know, actually, this is what we refer to this as, et cetera, et cetera. So just moving away from talking about this as if it's one isolated conversation, it's a continuous conversation. And with that, going to turn it back to Taylor, who's going to just briefly show us some images of her racial autobiography, if she were to share it with her child.
Thanks, Liz. So the first image that I want to share is my family crest on my mother's side. And the reason why this is important to me is because as the descendant of people who were enslaved, we didn't get the luxury of celebrating our family crest. The name is attached to so much burden. And so one of my cousins who's a beautiful artist, took it upon himself to create our family crest that highlights our family history in Marion, Alabama, which is right outside of Selma. It's the country in Alabama. But with rich roots in history. And so I'm proud to be part of this family with so much history. The top left image is of my grandmother. She was an educator and a staunch advocate for civil rights. She is the one who told my grandfather that they needed to move from the North back down South during the civil rights movement to join the movement and become advocates and leaders. She took me to my first protest when I was 3 to talk about the importance of education budgets and how we have to prioritize our children to ensure a better future. And so this sense of activism was instilled in me by a Black woman. And the bottom picture is a picture of my grandfather, my mother, and my grandmother, and baby me at the 25th anniversary of the March on Washington. So I was 1 in that photo. So this was just the March on Washington with the I Have a Dream speech was just 25 years before I was born. And so that's what this picture is. These 2 images, that's my father, who passed away in 2013. And up until the time of his death, he was a strong advocate. This image is of him in a hoodie that, despite the fact that he was in his home, and he was for a good part of the last piece of his life homebound, he insisted that my sister go get him a hoodie so that he could stand in solidarity with Trayvon Martin. One of the last things he did in his little scooter, because he went to downtown Atlanta to stand in solidarity with undocumented citizens. And so that, again, is the lens that I have. And my mother, who is also a compass for myself, for who I am. She is now the executive director of the ACLU. So she is the one who had the talks, as Liz said, the multiple talks with me, who continues to advocate for me and my child and my husband. She is who I'm rooted in. The bottom picture is my aunt. She was also my pre-K teacher at Shepherd Elementary School. Go Mustangs. And she made sure that the images that she used to teach us, like the ABCs, were reflective of Black culture. We sang the National Negro Anthem every single day. That was her calling. And so shout out to all my DCPS teachers, all the teachers here who have taken it upon them to speak out about Blackness in their classrooms. These are my friends, my rocks, and I look to them for guidance. And, you know, admittedly, I don't have a lot of white friends at this juncture of my life, but the ones that do have put in the work to advocate for Black lives, and I see them, and I appreciate them for standing up for me. And then to the far right, my whole entire life, my whole life. That's my husband, who is also a DC native. I have to worry about not only the way I move in America as a Black woman, but how he moves in America as a Black man. And I have to acknowledge that his experience is different from mine. And our daughter, again, I mentioned that I choose books for her that are reflective of positive Black images. This book that she's looking at in this photo is Dream Big Little One, by Vashti Harrison. And so she has other books like this, like Little Leaders, and other books that can speak, that show positive images of Black leaders. And then she also has more diverse books as well. And so for families who are looking for resources, this would be a great one. But this is only half the story, but I wanted to share, again, the positive experiences of being Black. And to be perfectly honest, that's something that I had to cope with as a Black student at a upper class, white, all-girl school in Bethesda, Maryland. These are things that I had to grapple with, and these are things that I never want my child to grapple with. So putting up positive Black images for my child is important to me. So that's my piece.
Thank you for sharing, Taylor. We're gonna skip this video, but I encourage you all to watch it. The young Black girl who's featured here is Naomi Walder, and she shared a very powerful speech at March for Our Lives, I think maybe like 2 years ago at this point. Once again, that'll be in the folder, but now we're gonna shift the conversation to talking about how to talk about race with our preteens. So would love to hear from you all in the chat. Who are some of the young people that your children look up to these days? It's okay if, well, I was about to show my age. I was going to say Hannah Montana. Nobody watches that anymore. But who are the young people that your children look up to? Share that in the chat, and we're going to go to this next screen. All right, so this next strategy is very simple, and it's just showing your preteens examples of young resistors. Give them someone to look up to so they can feel like in a world where there's so much going on, and sometimes I feel like adults are the only people who can make decisions, who can make a change. Wow, look, that kid looks like me. That kid has the same skin color as me. That kid has the same hair as me. That's a kid. That's a preteen. Just making it seem like it actually is possible. So now what I want you to do in the chat is to share with us how many of these people on the screen do you know? Share with us their names. Don't worry, I'm going to share their names in a little bit, but for now I want to see who on the screen looks familiar to you. Share their names in the chat. And now what I'm gonna do is we're gonna share who these young resistors are. And if you have a pen next to you, paper, or when we share the recording, you can rewind. I'm not going to give you all the context about these young resistors because I want you to look them up and I want you to learn more about them. So I'm going to start from the top left. So up on the top left, that's Sophia Cruz. On the bottom of Sophia, we have Desmond is amazing. Then we have Marley Diaz underneath Desmond is amazing. In the middle, we have Zaya Wade. I didn't know if she might be most familiar to folks. But then to the right, we have Little Miss Flint, who's now 13, y'all. When we first were introduced to her, she was so young, still young. And then underneath Little Miss Flint, we have Greta Thunberg. So just keeping in mind, like, how many of these young resistors did you know? Out of the ones that you knew, did some of them share a racial identity? Did you only know the ones who were Black, Latinx, white, etc.? Why might that be? And how can we expand the number of young resistors, our preteens especially, but all of our kids are exposed to? So that will be just something I'd love for you all to keep in mind. And DJ, this next question is going to come for you. Who are a few young resistors that your little ones look up to?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny. The two main ones that sort of jump off the screen for me are the young. They're both young ladies from the show Blackish, but one has a spinoff called Grownish. So that's Yara Shahidi. And when I tell you Yara Shahidi is just like a family favorite of ours in terms of young activism, but definitely someone who our 8-year-old Adri looks up to. And then the younger daughter, the twin, and I don't remember her name off the top of my head right now, but she also produced her own movie, wrote and produced her own movie, which was a spinoff of the movie Big, which was one of my favorite movies as a kid. And I would say those are definitely two of the more prominent ones that pop up off of the screen. As she is approaching preteendom, she has also gotten into Ariana Grande, who is, arguably a woman of color, not a Black woman of color, but a woman of color. We can talk about how she presents and all that kind of thing. I'm just happy she's finding strong women to believe in. But yeah, in terms of younger women of color, in terms of activism, Yara Shahidi is probably the biggest name people will recognize.
Thank you, DJ. And I think the other person from Blackish is Marsai. Feel free to correct me if my pronunciation is off. Marsai Martin. She's awesome, and that was a great film that she was in with Issa Rae, who, for y'all who watch Insecure, let me know if you want to chat about that later. So just showing examples of young resistors, and feel free in the chat if you want to share a few other examples of some young resistors that you and your children look up to. We'd love to hear so we can all do some more research on that. All right, y'all, we're getting close to the next strategy, but first DJ is going to share a little bit of his racial autobiography for you. And by a little bit, I mean a lot, because he had a lot of photos, because he clearly loves his Black family.
I promise y'all, I'm not going to take up too much time. There's a whole bunch of pictures here. There's a common thread, though. My mom, my dad, my 2 children, and my wife. And so let's go with the picture all of the top of the bald man with glasses, mid-song lyric with the girl with overalls. So that's my dad, Daryl Brooks Sr. He happens to be the head men's basketball coach at Bowie State University, hence the swag. This past weekend, we actually hung out for the first time in a long time, considering everything going on. And one of the things that I took out of that experience was just how much this man had just been the monicum of what I thought a Black man should be. And it's not ever something that I ever thought about, like, as I was growing up, oh, you know, I have like 2 parents in the house, and like my dad's around, and like I love him, and like he has a job, he's right, like all of the, you know, sort of negative generalizations that are made about us, like, weren't things that I was ever considered about, and like that's largely in part to him. One of the things that has been coming up for me in all of this, in terms of like fear of having conversations with our kids, is that, you know, we don't want to, like, similarly to like not wanting to dim their light, we don't want to have to make our kids make adult decisions. And when you give them this information, it robs them of that ability to continue to make childlike decisions. And so my dad afforded me the opportunity to be and stay a child throughout my childhood. And that is something I will never be able to repay to him. He is my best friend. Anybody who's listening who may have like gone to school with me, either undergrad or grad, will know that like if I talk about my dad long enough, I'll probably cry. So, but monicum of joy, masculinity, protection, partnership, and work ethic. And while he never told me I needed to work twice as hard to be just as good as a non-person of color, he instilled in me the work just to work hard because I want to work hard. And so that's something that I've carried with me throughout my entire adult life. And then so the lady, if you go 2 pictures to the left over, that very, very, very chocolate divine lady looking at a chocolate divine cake, that is my mom, Sandy Brooks. This is at her 63rd birthday, not too long ago. It's okay to say that Black don't crack because it's true. And so one of the things that I realized over the past year about my mom is just like she was the monicum of like Black resilience. She was one of 12 children raised in a 2-bedroom household in the very rural south of the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Her mother was one of 22 children. And so when I said, yeah, they were like poor, 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 and country, and you would never know it from, you know, how elegant she is. And in elementary school in Fairfax, Virginia, where I was one of 10 Black kids in the 500-person school, they would say she speaks so well. And that's one of the things that she passed down to me. She used to make me answer the phone, "Hello, Brooks residence, may I help you?" And I hated it because it was pre-caller ID, so I never knew if it was one of my boys calling. And so when I got through the whole thing, they would just play me and clown me like, "Oh man, your mama make you talk like that." So yeah, just that idea of what it meant to be Black, and that Black wasn't a monolith, and that you could speak well, and that you could be well read, and that you could be well educated. But also, and this is the one thing that I parsed out later, was just assimilation and really code switching. And we didn't have that verbiage, we didn't have that language, but I knew how to turn it on. And when caller ID came out the next year and I saw who was calling, I could code switch to my boys, and I could code switch to someone who I knew was calling from my mom, right? And so like I've taken that with me everywhere that I've gone, and only recently have I been really comfortable with merging the two, so that I feel like I'm being authentically me in a way that I'm comfortable with, regardless of who I'm with. So that's my mom. If you go to the bottom right picture, that is my gorgeous wife, Danielle, and my daughter, Adrielle. And so Adrielle's a clown. I can't tell. I don't know if you can tell with her eyes closed. She's a super clown. She's the best of me and the worst of me. But the thing that she has really taught me is just like the re-envisioning of what it means to be strong. My daughter is a state champion gymnast, and she will tell you that in a heartbeat. I've won money off of my daughter doing more push-ups than grown men and doing more pull-ups than grown men. But beyond that, my daughter has been through, a little bit in terms of just her own race and equity walk. And she is just a bundle of happiness and joy, and to see that like resilience, kind of like my mom, but like embodied in her in the forms of a strength. It's been really pleasant and refreshing. So that's my daughter. My wife is the sort of like she's taught me about the duality of Black femininity, right? Like tough and strong and lovely and graceful, and she makes this whole thing run. So like whenever something comes up, I have to say I got to check with the boss because she's the boss, and it's not just one of those like sayings. It's because she actually does make this whole thing run. And I've appreciated that. And then if you look bottom left, the little kid with the the very, very little kid with the jean jacket and the hat and his hands on his head, that's my son Dax. He is Daxton. We call him Dax. He's 20 months old. He is so little, but he is so full of life. And the thing that he has really taught me is just like a renewed faith in humanity with everything that's going on for this little kid to have this. This Black boy joy, we've heard it before. Like it's been really inspirational to me. So yeah, that's my family. That's who makes me up.
Thank you for sharing, DJ. And I appreciate you bringing up so many positive aspects of your identity as a Black man and a Black boy growing up, but then also some difficult aspects. From what I heard you share were a few microaggressions. Another thing that I'd love for people to look up if they're unfamiliar with them. Microaggressions, I heard you mention like, oh, you speak so well. And what's hidden is you speak so well for a Black person. There's an element of a surprise. You dress so well, etc. So compliments like that, the intent might be positive, but the impact and what's lying underneath it is what leads it to be a microaggression. So just another example of something that we may experience. The other thing that I wanted to mention is racial autobiographies. We have a list of questions that you can answer. So if you're wondering, okay, these pictures were cute, but like, what are they rooted in? Family, your middle school years, your neighborhood experience, your community experience. There are many questions that you can answer, and you can answer them in written form, or you can use pictures to share that story. And so that's what DJ, myself, and Taylor did here. Big kudos to Wheatley Education Campus. If y'all are on here, they have been doing racial autobiographies with their staff. Every staff meeting, someone new shares their racial autobiography, and I believe all of their staff got to do it this year. So kudos to Wheatley for sharing an example of how that can look in the school. So if we go to our next slide, we're going to talk about how do you talk about race with teens, and if we go on to the slide after that, this is when we get real. We've always kept it real. We're never lying to our kids. We're talking to them in a developmentally appropriate way. By the time we get to high school, this is where we start to think about where they are as critical thinkers, empowering them to be anti-racist, co-conspirators, allies, and really giving them the facts behind a lot of what we're experiencing. Let's get them some information about the history of how we got here. Many of us know just a few days ago, we were commemorating, or we were reminded of the fact that 99 years ago, there was the Tulsa Black Massacre, giving them information about the Tulsa Black Massacre and how that kind of parallels to what we're experiencing in different ways today. Giving them that context by arming them with the knowledge. And so here on the screen, once again, you'll get the link. You have several different resources to kind of support you in your child's journey to anti-racism. Anti-racism is not just for white people or white students. Anti-racism is for everyone. We should all be striving to be anti-racist. So wanted to keep that in mind. And if we go to the next slide, the next slide is just engaging with your teenager in a more deepful way to really understand where they're coming from. So here we have on the left a few tips for healthy discourse. And on the right, we have sentence starters for how to engage in that conversation. So I do this a lot of the time in my house. If I have some friends on, they probably know this as well. When your teenager is expressing themselves to you, really actively listening and repeat back what you heard them say, not your version or what you think they said, but actually what are they saying to you so they can feel like you've been heard. Many of us have been teenagers before, and we've been there where you feel like people are just not hearing you. A simple way to get at that is by saying, so what I heard you say was, and repeating it back to them. So once again, this is a resource that we'll share an article for, but it's a really great way to engage in a deeper way with your teenagers and also give them the opportunity to take the lead. And so you can learn something from them. We all know in our dynamics with our families, parents, there might be an element of deference. I respect you as an adult. What you say goes. And culturally, there are a lot of implications there as well. But this is an opportunity to allow the student, where appropriate, to be the one that's doing the teaching and for us to learn from them and vice versa. So I like to call it deference with reciprocity. A whole bunch of syllables, but I'm learning from you and you're learning from me, and we're on this journey together. So another great resource, and that was our last strategy. So to go on to the next slide. All of the strategies that we've gone through tonight, we've gone through 5, but really we've gotten a lot more resources through tonight. Really thank you all for sticking with us through this entire engagement. Also, believe it or not, I hope you don't feel bamboozled, but homework for the families. I really encourage you all. We talked a little bit about representation in books. I want you to read that article. It's time to talk about Dr. Seuss. Learn a little bit more about the history of Dr. Seuss, and you make the decision about what you want to do when it comes to those books in your home. Watch the videos that we shared a little earlier as well, and watch it with your family. Have a conversation. As Taylor mentioned, a lot of you are wondering, where can this conversation start? Online right now, more than ever, people are sharing so many resources. So why not check out the video on your own, see if you deem it appropriate to watch with your child, and maybe that can be the conversation starter if you're looking for a place to start the talks, multiple talks for the first time. All right, and so now I know we have just a few short minutes for Q&A. Wanted to open up the space.
Yeah, so we know that it is very, for some folks, beyond dinner time, and it's bath time for a lot of people, and I appreciate you all holding on. We want to be able to create space for questions. One of the questions that we had pop up earlier was, how do you balance the right of young children of color to feel joyful, be innocent, trust in the best people, and love themselves with speaking to them about the fact that the color of their skin makes them vulnerable to racism and sometimes even violence? Do either of you want to answer that? We kind of touched on it, but I just want to make sure that we're able to address it again.
Sure, I could. Just from my perspective. Sorry, there's a echo. Should be good now. Perfect, thank you. So yeah, just from my perspective, one of the things that I learned late and that I'm trying to help my children learn early is that being Black is not a monolith. And so what I mean by that is that the narrative of who it is to be a Black person, what it means to sound like a Black person, to experience the things that Black people experience, it's very diverse. It's one of the things that I love about our culture. And so in those conversations, I tried to weave in that while there are, a few negative things that are a part of the history of us being in this country, there are so many other wonderful things about the history of us being in this country, Black history being American history. And so trying to temper those two things, and hoping I do a good job of giving more of the latter than the former.
Awesome. Thanks, DJ. This is a question. And Noelle posted this. Any suggestions about how we can discuss race with our adult white family members who aren't open-minded about hearing these messages? And she said that she's asking this as a white woman with a white family. I understand. I don't know what it's like to be at Thanksgiving with an all-white family talking about different issues. And I know that is a question that a lot of folks are dealing with, like, how do I confront racism? And I know that a lot of people at my own dinner table, how do I talk to my well-intentioned, or maybe not well-intentioned, uncle or aunt or grandpa or even parents? And so I would say to study up, read up. If it happens at the dinner table, confront it. You're gonna make the decision that's best for you and your family, but understanding that at holidays, your children are watching, and so even if you are not able to change the minds of the adults in your life, to be able to model advocacy on behalf of people who are not at the table, who are not in your homes, is key. And so you may not be able, like I said, you may not be able to change hearts and minds, but your children will see how you react, how you engage. And to me, as a Black woman, that's more important. From my perspective, that is more important. And so I can't speak for the other folks. I can't speak for DJ or Liz, but I would say there might be other resources. We do have resources specifically for white families about how to talk about racism and how to be anti-racist. And so to really study up on those resources, and then so that you feel prepared to engage that way. So I hope, Noelle, that answers your question, and I hope that it answers the question of other white families who may have the same question. I can only speak to so much as a Black woman, but kudos to you all who are having those difficult conversations at the holidays when nobody wants to talk about it. And so if you are engaging in those spaces, that's really important. Another question that we have. There was one question that I saw, and I don't know how you all want to tackle this one, about the term Black or African American. That was a question that was posed. And so I don't know which of, Liz, if you want to take this one. I don't want to volunteer you, but.
Yeah. So the difference with Black and African American is honestly up to the person, and by the person I mean the Black or the African American person. I'm going back to, like, I went to school for public relations, had to take journalism class, etc. This question came up. But ultimately, for me personally, I prefer Black. It's succinct, it's one syllable, and it doesn't sound overly PC. I think also because we don't call white something else, it's not white American, it's just white. I'm like, well, I'm Black. I have so many other experiences that I bring with me, but at the end of the day, you look at me and you treat me as a Black person. So that's what I'm going to call myself. So all that being said, it's a sake of preference and feeling out the space and just seeing how modeling based on how others identify themselves. If you're in a space with a Black person and they identify themselves as Black, I would continue to identify, to refer to them as such. If you're in a space with a Black person that identifies themselves as African American, then that's your key. Just like we treat pronouns. At the beginning of this, we said she, her, and hers. Now you know how to refer to me when it comes to my pronouns. If I refer to me as a Black woman, I would hope that you refer back to me as a Black woman. If you call me African American, I'm gonna feel like you're trying to be PC, as in politically correct, but it's okay, no harm. It's all good.
Thanks, Liz. And actually, this was a question that popped up pretty recently, and I would love for you to highlight the work that your office does in our schools to support students, to support teachers, because one of the questions that was asked was, what are schools and school districts doing to address these issues? And so that if I'm doing the work at home, making sure that it's not undone at school.
Yeah, no, that's a really important question. That's a really important question. And so in my team, I have a team, many of us are behind the scenes right here. Want to shout out Javi, Jen, Christina, Edgar, Robin, equity strategy and programming team. We lead professional development specifically around racial equity in DC public schools, as well as in central office. We also support teams with their equity planning. So what does equity look like for my team? What does that look like for my school year? We support them with planning out what that might look like. We also work on very thorny issues that are addressing different inequities in our system. So for example, in DCPS, disproportionately Black and brown students and across the US are identified as needing special education services or having an emotional disorder. We're working with the mental health team to develop a protocol to address that and make sure that Black and brown students are not put into those programs at a disproportionate rate. So it's a mixture of professional development, strategic thinking, developing new processes and protocols, but also making sure that we're addressing inequities with an equity lens. And I know DCPS, you've heard me say this over and over time, all over. Addressing inequities with an equity lens means we're not only looking at shifting our practices. I know in the education space, we love to say the way to solve our issues is through culturally responsive pedagogy, through culturally responsive teaching. That is a way, but it's more than that. It's looking at what policies are in place, what needs to change, who's at the decision-making table to make those policies. Does everyone look the same? Does everyone come from the same type of school? Does everyone come from the same area? What are the identity and mindsets, the hearts and minds that need to change here? And what's the culture of the district, of our school that needs to change? That's our approach to equity in the district. Mindsets, hearts and minds, policies, practices, and culture. We're shifting all of those aspects in schools and in central office. I'm happy to answer other questions about that may come up, and I'm gonna have my email at the end of this slideshow as well.
Thanks, Liz. You all have been on here for two hours, and so I want to acknowledge that. Kudos to you all. I want to encourage all of you all to think of 3 people that your family can reach out to today just to show love. You know, this has been, and you can hear my baby in the background, but this has been a tough conversation, if you're looking for an action to do now, just, send a message to show people that you care about them. It doesn't have to be this long message about racial injustice and everything, but just a hello, and to say how you appreciate people. And this photo is of one of our special education teachers at the Youth Services Center, Mr. Johnson, and he has a lot of great resources for students. He's done some amazing work, and so he has an Instagram at educators on Instagram, and so he's really creative, and I follow him on Instagram. He's a pretty cool dude, and we have more workshops coming up for my DCPS families and maybe even charter school families who are within the city who are wondering about how to enroll in DCPS. We have the second workshop of this week on Friday, June 5th at 2 p.m. We also have, it's Happy Pride. I would be remiss if I did not mention that the importance of intersectionality and how the Pride movement was really launched by Black and brown trans women. And so when we think about Pride and we think about names like Marsha P. Johnson, who were really literally on the front lines of justice for the LGBTQ community, this is actually a nice segue. Other people have to have conversations with their children about what it means to be part of the LGBTQ community, and so we want to support our families in these spaces too. And so we have two workshops, Loving with Pride, Supporting Your LGBTQA Child, which will walk parents and families through the process of talking about the different LGBTQ identities and orientations and how you can actively support your children. We also have families who are, as a coming out family stories, who are willing to share their stories with us and the broader community about what it was like to come out for them, how they experienced it as a family and as students. So we would love to have you join us for these events. We have more parent universities, so please, by all means, feel free to check out additional workshops at bit.ly/DCPS Parent U RSVP. That was a long one. And keep checking, because we will continue to put out workshops for the DCPS community, but then also, people who are looking for more information about supporting their children. We're here. A lot of you all asked about, where can I find all this information? Here is the link, bit.ly/Parent U Race. It is all under lowercase. Sorry, it's all lowercase. And so you'll have the slides from this workshop in English and Spanish available for folks. And then we also want to know how we did, how helpful was our information, how helpful were our resources for our DCPS families. What type of workshops would you like to see from us? If you do have questions or ideas as well, feel free to email us, parentu@k12.dc.gov. If you have specific questions about equity for DCPS families, about bringing the equity team to your school when everything clears the air, please, by all means, email dcps.equity@k12.dc.gov. This will be on YouTube, on our YouTube page. I want to say by the end of the week at the latest, and so we will make sure to post this as quickly as possible, but you can absolutely access the resources now. please, really quickly before you leave, again, if you're not able to fill out the evaluation, feel free to rate the workshop on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being like, y'all totally missed the mark, I'm never doing anything with DCPS ever again, y'all wasted 2 hours of my time, to 5 being like, oh my goodness, this was so amazing and I can't wait to use these resources that I've learned, and everything in between. So thank you all again. Thank you again to my multicultural team of moderators who were plugging in responses to your questions, for giving up 2 hours, more than 2 hours of your time at this point, to support not only DCPS families, but families all across the city, all across the DMV, and all across the country. And thank you to Liz and DJ for being vulnerable, to speaking to your experiences, to sharing information. And so what we covered today was a lot of information. These are really stressful and heavy times. And so allowing yourselves all a little bit of grace. I would recommend finding a self-care moment for yourselves today to decompress. I'm about to go love up on my Black child and hug her, so that, you know, she knows that she has someone to be able to go to and trust. And then we're going to have bath time, and I'm putting her straight to bed, and I'm going to have my self-care time. But thank you all again for your support, for being vulnerable and asking, how can I do this? And I extend all the love and support to you all. And you all are so wonderful, and be safe, be open, and yeah, this is half the battle. So thank you all.